Welcome everyone who's joining us tonight. Thank you for being here. We're gonna do a slow start, let a couple more people hop on. For those of you who are here, I would welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, where you're based in Minnesota, and what brought you here tonight. Welcome Kara and welcome Lori. Great to have both of you. Welcome Teresa and Lynette. Thanks for being here. Okay. So I'm going to slowly start us off and we'll let more people hop on as they are able. My name is Erin West. I am a tenant organizer at Homeline. I use she, her pronouns. And I've been hosting these webinars for the past, almost for the past year now. We at Homeline offer several different resources to tenants, including legal advice over our hotline, policy advocacy, and organizing coaching. So I'm on the organizing team, and during COVID, it was much more difficult to meet tenants in person. So we took the opportunity to meet online. And we've had a series of webinars, this being the 8th, I believe. They're all recorded and available on our website, as will this one. And I'm excited to have you all tonight. Just again about Homeline, I want to let everyone here know that I'm an organizer. I'm not trained to give legal advice. If you have a question about your rental situation, a legal question, please do get in touch with us at our hotline number. And the hotline number is here available in 4 different languages. But tonight we'll just be talking about organizing really and giving some basic information around evictions. All right, so tonight we're here to talk about the eviction moratorium off-ramp, this confusing political process that's happening right now in which more and more tenants are finding themselves vulnerable to eviction. But before we dive into that, I want to make sure everyone here knows what we're talking about when we talk about an eviction, because this word gets used for a bunch of different things sometimes. So there are formal evictions and there are informal evictions. As organizers, we work often around informal evictions, such as tenants who are forced to leave because they experience a rent increase they can't meet. We would consider that an informal eviction, but it wouldn't be formal unless that tenant had to appear in court. So formal evictions where your landlord files in court are often around non-payment of rent, illegal activity, or breaches of lease. And Minnesota has one of the quickest timelines in the country for eviction. It can be as quick as 14 days from start to finish in filing. And there's a bunch of different steps along the way in which we advocate for renters to assert their rights, get legal advice, access representation if they can. At Homeline, we also send letters to everyone in the state who has an eviction filed against them. We're doing that currently. But it's not always easy to intervene in this timeline because it is so fast. And so this is a moment where we're coming together to share more information about how to be proactive and prevent the eviction filings from even happening, but then also if you do experience an eviction filing, how to intervene in this timeline, how to make sure you can keep yourself safe. And just to be clear, when we're talking tonight about evictions, evictions we know disproportionately impact renters of color, women, and families. And I just want to keep that front and center as the renters most affected by what we're talking about tonight. And a brief overview of where we've been, how we've gotten to where we are now. So during the pandemic, Governor Walz declared an eviction moratorium, and he could do so because of his emergency powers. It started in March of 2020, and then in June of this year, it began to phase out. And we're going to talk about what that phase out is and what it means for you all. I'll say already that since June, since that phase out began, Homeline has experienced record calls coming to us and to our hotline, and also an exponential growth in eviction filings. And I'll give you a visual idea of what that means. So this is from Eviction Lab, which is a great resource for anyone who's interested. You can see pre-pandemic eviction filings per week in Minnesota were above 200. The moratorium brought that down to really low double digits, maybe even single digits a couple weeks. So really, really low in the state. And this is incredible, an incredible change. And then it slowly began to rise as there were more and more exemptions. And then you can see starting in June, it skyrockets. And that's due to the off-ramp. So right now I would like to introduce evictions attorney at Homeline, Andrea Palumbo. She's going to speak about what this off-ramp is and what it means for us and what it means for tenants as well as tenant advocates, and how we can organize to keep each other safe and in our homes.
Great, thanks, Erin. Yeah, as Erin was saying, during the peacetime emergency, there was basically a blanket ban. Well, I don't want to say blanket ban, but nearly all evictions were prohibited, except in limited circumstances. And that prohibition ended during the special session. And as of June 30th, that's when the off-ramp began, which is gradually allowing landlords to file more evictions. So the protection is basically going to be going lower and lower and lower and lower until basically June 1st of next year. The most important thing to remember is if a tenant is behind on their rent or behind on their utilities, there's the key thing for them to do to protect themselves is to put in an application for rent assistance to renthelpmn.org. And that will give the protection against being evicted for non-payment of rent. There are other reasons that a tenant can be evicted or that their lease can be terminated, but most evictions in Minnesota are happening because of non-payment of rent. So the big protection there is to get that application in. It's not a perfect system. It's backlogged. It takes time, but at this point, that is the best protection for a tenant. And a tenant can apply for back rent, and they can also apply for front rent going forward, and they can also apply for utilities help. So that's really, really key. So right now, where we are, it is August 12th. So a landlord can end a lease or file an eviction if a tenant materially violates the lease, or if they refuse to apply for rental assistance, or if they refuse to work with the landlord in getting rental assistance. And as of tomorrow, if they are behind on rent and are not eligible for rental assistance. I should say the eligibility for rental assistance is really broad. So it isn't something like eligibility for legal aid. It's very, very broad. So if people think they're eligible, they really should apply. The material lease violations, we have not seen a whole lot of cases in the court, But material lease violations mean that something serious has happened that violates the lease. Most often it's something like having someone living there who's not on the lease, or property damage. A person can also be evicted if they are doing certain illegal activities on site, like allowing controlled substances or weapons. If they're doing significant property damage or causing a safety hazard for someone on site or an employee on site. So that's really what we're looking at for evictions. It's very limited compared to what we would be seeing in a non-pandemic world. Generally, if we weren't in a pandemic situation, it is fairly easy for a landlord to terminate a lease or file an eviction, unfortunately. And like Erin says, it happens fast. So what we're looking at tomorrow is going to be, we're going to be in phase 3 of the off-ramp, and that is going to go, that starts tomorrow. The next phase is going to be in September, and that's when people who are not eligible for rental assistance and can start to be evicted. We can start to see in October is where we're going to see the more serious protections start to go away, and that's when really a lot of the rental protections are going to end. And June 1st is really the cutoff for all rental protection, and that's really the non-payment of rent protections. There has been some news lately. The CDC has reissued an order protecting against evictions, and in Minnesota, it doesn't really affect us right now because Minnesota has stronger protections than what's in place in the CDC order. And the CDC order really in Minnesota would be coming into play between September 12th and October 12th, if at all. And the big thing there, in Minnesota, you don't have to take affirmative steps to be protected from eviction. With the CDC order, you have to complete an affidavit that states that you're behind on your rent, you're trying to pay your rent with all available means, and it is only effective in certain counties with substantial or high rates of COVID transmission, which honestly is most of Minnesota. So that will come into play a little later on in September, October, maybe, because we have pretty good protections in place. So that's really what we're looking at. The most important thing really is to get the application for rental assistance in. In some counties, there's a second program called Project Zero Balance in Hennepin, Ramsey, and Dakota County. That's a little different. That's something that the landlord starts. Rent Help Minnesota, the tenant starts. The fastest way to apply for that is online. And again, it is backlogged, but it is easiest if the tenant can make that application through the website, renthelpmn.org. The other way to get an application going is through United Way 211. And I expect Nadia and Reagan are going to be covering a lot about that. So I don't really want to get into that too much. But that's really what we're looking at. The protections are in place, but they are going to be going down through really basically October of this year. Next slide. Yeah, know your rights, apply for help. We are seeing some cases where landlords are trying to evict people and they're saying that they haven't applied or they refuse to apply, and that's not good. That's not cool. They are really, we're seeing this situation misstated, that what the landlord is saying is, well, I knocked on the door and they didn't answer, so they're not cooperating with me. So it's really important to make that application and document it as best as you can. If you have questions, you can call Homeline. You can talk to legal aid. But really, the most important thing is to be aware that right now, when it comes to non-payment of rent, that is a really limited situation that you basically can't be evicted for that right now. So I'm going to turn things back over to Erin.
Thanks so much, Andrea. And yes, I want to clarify that this graphic we have on the slide was not created by Homeline. It's from the Rent Help MN website. And so yes, this misinformation about tenants refusing to apply unfortunately appears on this graphic, but is not something that, yeah, again, we've seen at Homeline often enough to call it a trend, probably. And I just want to also draw everyone's attention briefly to this 15-day notice that is unique to the protections right now, but doesn't exist as a standard law in Minnesota. Like I said before, the standard timeline for eviction proceedings is really quick. This 15-day notice is crucial because as a tenant, you'll have to be properly served a notice to your door in writing, and in that intervening 15 days before your landlord can go to court, that's a really key time where you might have the opportunity to apply for Rent Help MN and then demonstrate that application. So that's why that window exists right now, and but it only exists until October 12th, unfortunately. And this is a place where those of us who are on this call as advocates, I think, can really lean on the fact that this notice exists here and the sky's not falling, and say that after October 12th, this should also exist, right? Anything else, Andrea? I think you did a great job covering that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this, I'm glad that Erin pointed out that this is not our graphic, but yeah, I did not mention the 15-day notice, and ordinarily that is not required. Evictions just go flying through the court. And the idea around the 15-day notice is to give tenants the opportunity to really get a game plan together and figure out, do they want to stay? Do they want to go? And are they able to get an application for assistance in? So that's a really, really important time.
Great. And I don't know that, I think I missed mentioning this in the beginning, but we're going to have a big chunk of time for Q&A at the end of the presentations from our panelists. So feel free to write it in the chat if you don't want to forget, but just know that we will be taking your questions just at the end for Andrea and Nadia and Reagan all together. So feel free to brainstorm those questions now. What we're going to talk about now is what to do, what we can do with that 15-day window as tenants and tenant advocates, and even with the window that exists after filing. And Nadia and Reagan are both going to speak to their work in standing in solidarity with tenants facing eviction and in organizing with communities to keep our neighbors safe and housed. So I'd like to introduce Nadia Hecker-O'Brien and Reagan Reek. If you two would like to do a quick hello and let folks know who you are, where you're coming from, and then take it from here.
My name is Nadia. I'm a housing specialist, so primarily working in homelessness prevention at a social service agency in Bloomington, serving the South Metro. Yeah, Reagan.
I'm an AmeriCorps Vista tenant organizer, working with the city of Bloomington in their public health division. So this is a deep part of my work because, evictions cause a lot of other issues. It's not just removing somebody from their home. It affects a lot of health issues as well.
Shall I stop sharing now?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
All right. So Reagan and I have both done a lot of work lately to varying extents around this 15-day period. So we have both done some outreach to tenants who are facing eviction. We've done it together in the area, and then we've both worked on actually helping folks do the application. So I'm going to focus a little bit on the application piece. We'll get to the outreach after that. So let's see here. So just gonna highlight a couple of things about the application. It sounded like some folks on the call now are probably processors like I am too, which means I am someone who gets applications and gets them to the point of payment, and I also help people do the application. So like Andrea said, the barriers are high. It's really not an ideal application process at all and requires a lot of community support to get it done. So it basically requires a computer. There are a lot of kind of browser issues, all kinds of things that people run into that cause them issues. And something I really want to highlight about when there are issues with the application is that if your application is in an incomplete status, that means you don't get to the last page and click done, you are not protected. So you have to get to a point of having a pending application in order to be protected. And so a lot of folks will kind of make it through part of the application, not finish it up. And so all the protections we just talked about don't exist for them. So maybe just go to the next slide for a second so I can. So if you see this is what an application looks like. So we're actually on my page here, there's this blue button and it says pre-qualification letter. So once an application is submitted, this pre-qualification letter will be there. And you click on that, and then you get the letter that says proves you've applied. If the application isn't submitted, it'll say begin application in that blue button, and that means you're not protected by a pending application. So that's really important to keep in mind. And then if you just want to go back, Reagan. Requires a lot of documentation at time of applying, lots of scanning and uploading things. Like Andrea said, there is a paper option. It just takes a really long time to get that processed and uploaded. And an application will be incomplete at the time of submission if certain documents aren't submitted. So that's another barrier, but important to note. There is a pre-application in multiple languages. That's kind of the initial part where you just figure out that you're eligible. But the main application, which is about 10 pages you click through, is in English only. You can select that your primary language isn't English, but the application itself is in English. And folks will generally get communicated with from processors in English. Like this isn't always the case. There's a whole bunch of processors from culturally specific organizations who are bilingual. But I have a lot of clients who I helped apply. They get with a processor and get an extremely long email in English, and their primary language is Spanish. And all they see is you have 5 days to respond, otherwise your application is denied, and they're in a panic, of course. So staying connected to folks that we're helping with applications who aren't primary English speakers is super important. And definitely I think honoring just the fears and anxiety when you can't understand something and you're told you have 5 days to do something about it. So let's see, I think, yeah, we can go to the next, yeah, that one. So this is what the letter looks like when you have a pending application. So it says the tenant's name, it says the months they've applied for, the amount of money, it's dated, it has the date I like took the screenshot, but it also has the date I applied on. And so that I'm always encouraging folks to email that, get that to your landlord in some way that you can track. I've definitely had folks hand deliver it and then the landlord says they never got it. And a lot of landlords I'm interacting with they want this, and then they're also giving notices to folks. The front page will say like notice eviction, which is also another alarming thing. Folks think they're getting evicted. And then on the back page, it will be a form to fill out saying like, I think it's landlords are using it as proof that they've reached out to a tenant about it. And so a form to fill out to say, like I'm eligible for assistance, I applied, that kind of thing, and then to turn that into a landlord. So those two things are what I've seen a lot of folks need to kind of be in that pending status with their landlord. Funding, yeah, it's very backlogged. The amount of time it takes for a processor to finally reach out to you I've generally been seeing 1 to 2 months. Sometimes it's a little longer. And then the process in some counties for getting the money out after that can be even longer. So I generally tell folks it takes 2 to 4 months total from beginning of application to payment in the hand of your landlord, utility company, whatever. It takes a long time. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is just that blue button that we saw before that has the pre-qualification letter button or says begin application button. Once folks have already had funding approved and need assistance again, that button will then say reapply. And that begins the process for reapplication. And so a lot of it is double checking what you've uploaded. If it's something like Social Security statement, then that might be the same for a year. But if it's monthly income, you need to update your income information, update signatures. And again, seeing a lot of incomplete applications in the reapplication status, because you'd think if you did it once, you don't have to go through it all again, but you do. And I think I will leave it there for now and pass it to Reagan to talk a little bit about tenant outreach.
Awesome. Thank you, Nadia. So a really great way, can I keep moving on this? A really great way to get the word out about this, because as like Nadia and Andrea both said, like you need computers to get to this. To hear about this, you need to be online, you need to be moving through these things. Your landlord is supposed to inform you, but if they're not, how are you supposed to really know about it? There's a lot of barriers to like knowledge in this whole process. So what I have done and what I've done with Nadia a few times is actually go to people's homes who have been served an eviction notice. I get the information from Erin, and it usually comes with their name and the address. It'll include the unit number on there. And so we go out there and we do a door knock and we say, hi, we're here. This is where we're coming from. Here's some information and resources for you. So I was just going to walk through that really quick about the process of that. As we have said prior in this presentation, like it is important that if you are going to door knock to like hand information and resources to people or inform them about things, that you go ASAP. The turnaround time is very quick. And the barriers to attending the court hearing are very high. So again, in Hennepin County, like they're still being primarily held online. And I don't know how that is for the rest of the state, but here, if you're getting served an eviction, you are going to do that online, and you're going to go through Zoom. So that requires knowledge of Zoom, the ability to like move in and out of breakout rooms to do differing, you know, negotiations, trying to settle, trying to have conversations, and also access to a stable internet connection. So, and that is a person's best defense. It is critical that somebody that is being served an eviction notice is able to go to court so that they can, you know, defend themselves. I have all of this listed out later, and so we can go into that a little bit, but into like the actual door knocking of it, you know, get to the building, get there as soon as you can before the, you know, give them as much time between when you have this information and their court date to get to them. You know, I always recommend like going in teams of 2 if possible. It's always good to have somebody with you, and do your best to get inside, get into the building. The times that I've gone out to do some of this and just like door knocking in general, it's been pretty easy to get into the building, especially if you know the name of somebody. You're like, hi, I'm here to see Dave. I would like you to let me in. My friend's here and they're not answering. You know, go in, act like you belong. I've had no issues yet from anybody telling me to leave or anything, but I'm probably, the process I've been in through there, probably been about 10, 20 minutes at the most. I really try to utilize any strategy that I can to like get a hold of somebody, you know, calling via the intercom system if they have one, going to their door, knocking on their door, doing these multiple times, giving them some time to like hear you, stuff like that. And then what I've been doing is leaving behind information, sliding it right under their door, a really quick form letter, which I think I have pulled up. We'll just share that really quick. And it's a 1-page printout that I have here. Working in Bloomington, I have Veeps information on here because they're helping people with their applications, but this is, you know, Bloomington, Edina, Richfield area. And it just is saying, you know, like, we know that you have been notified by Homeland, like we've been notified by Homeland that you've been summoned to court. It's important that you go. All of the information on here of like, you know, the eviction moratorium has been lifted, but they can't evict you, as we've been talking about this whole time, for non-payment of rent. So really trying to highlight that, really trying to like make it easy to read and understandable, and also just like throwing in some information about legal resources if, you know, eviction is a scary and complicated process, especially if you're not familiar with court. So getting in there and like having to defend yourself against that while also potentially losing your home is a lot. So good to point them to people that know how to help, basically. So, oops. I'm just trying to get to this. Am I back? I'm sorry. We just have so many things going on right now. I think it's here. Okay, great. So yeah, we've talked about how quick that can be. An eviction on your record makes it really difficult to find housing afterwards. So we're preventing it as much as we can. You know, working with people to like keep them in their housing is very important, I think. We're still looking, as we've been doing this, like, okay, what happens if people do get evicted? And beyond that, like housing resources that they can access. If anybody knows of any, that would be super great to know about, because that's kind of been a struggle in this whole process, is maybe getting a hold of people, them still going to court, them losing and being evicted very quickly, so they don't have necessarily like the right amount of time to, or like enough time to find proper housing. So, you know, the process of it for me is like, do what you can. You might not get into contact with them, but that's okay. This is just like another support. I view it as like, this is just like one other level of support, one other like layer of like help in navigating that situation. That's it for me. I'll turn it back to Erin.
Great. Thanks so much, Reagan. Nadia, did you have anything else you wanted to share at the end of this portion?
No, that's all.
Okay, just checking. Great. Well, thank you so much to both Reagan and Nadia for all of that information. I know it was a lot at once about the application and the door knocking procedure, and Andrea also shared about what the off-ramp means. So we're going to move pretty quickly into your questions here and just have a discussion about each of these elements. I do want to highlight that what Reagan mentioned about the door knocking that they've been able to do in Bloomington is that Homeland collects eviction data each week. Right now we're collecting it for the entire state. And part of the eviction defense that we've been organizing around includes involving neighborhood groups, tenant organizers in different localities to notify them of the addresses that we poll every week that are in their area. So since Nadia and Reagan are in Bloomington area, the South Metro, we're able to send them the addresses we get each week with eviction filings, so then they can go out and attempt to intervene in that timeline and make sure that renters have a chance to defend themselves. So if this is an invitation to anyone here who feels moved to join that work and to be standing in solidarity with tenants facing eviction, please let me know. I'll put my email in the chat. You could also private message me right now in the chat. Right now, we have been offering this kind of collaboration with folks who are supported by organizations in the area. So let me know who you're affiliated with, and we can talk more about that collaboration. But we definitely need everyone and all of your efforts. So we'd be happy to have more people doing this work. I'm gonna hand it over to all of you and to ask your questions. It looks like we have a question in the Q&A from Teresa, and Teresa is saying, is it possible for a landlord to apply for a tenant and have a double application in the system?
So no, so what happens now is it will there are landlords who have applied for tenants in the system, but it will tie their accounts together, and a lot of the application is like personal consent, like release of information, privacy policy, things like that. And so the tenant themselves needs to consent to all of those things.
One thing we've gotten some calls about on the hotline is when you go to the application, there's some really scary language about threat of perjury, and that is really freaking people out. And if on the back end, if a landlord applies for Project Zero Balance and the tenant applies for Rent Help Minnesota, they will sort that out. So the language is really off-putting for a lot of people, and they're afraid they're going to get in trouble. And it's basically, if you tell the truth and put your documents together to the best of your ability, you're fine. So that's a real barrier we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. And to be clear, I think also there are some programs that are oriented towards landlords. You were saying, Andrea, especially those county specific programs. And occasionally we have seen, one of the concerns being that landlords would also try to double dip or to claim that their tenants are not applying and then also apply. So it's complicated to have both parties applying through different systems at the same time. This is definitely an issue and a concern. And if you hear more about that, please let us know. I think these stories are important to raise. Any other responses to that question? We'll take another one. So I'll invite folks to post their questions in the chat or the Q&A. But for now, I'll pose a question to you all. I think, yeah, something that I'm concerned about and that I know many people are concerned about is what will happen in October when all of the protections are lifted and a lot of people are still economically strapped due to the ramifications of a COVID pandemic that isn't over yet. And do you all expect to see, what do you all expect to happen in the courts and with these tenants? I mean, I've been hearing about a tidal wave of evictions that could potentially overwhelm courts or overwhelm social service agencies. Can you speak to preparations that anyone is doing in government or otherwise?
I can talk a little bit about that. We honestly expected to see a lot more cases filed than have been filed, because the July 14th was basically kind of when the floodgates we figured would be open, but we haven't seen a lot. So my sense is that landlords just want to get paid. But come October, that's when a lot of the protections are going to be gone. And I know that the Volunteer Lawyers Network and Legal Aid provide legal assistance at court hearings, and they're ramping up for potentially more cases. I did a training with the National Lawyers Guild to recruit more attorneys to take on eviction cases when they start coming in. So there are organizations that are kind of getting in place on the ground to deal with these cases when they're coming in. But we know at some point the cases are going to go back to where they were. And we know also that when tenants have attorneys in court, they do better. So we want to do whatever we can to get more tenants connected with attorneys in the courthouses. And also right now, for the foreseeable future, cases are going to be heard virtually. They're going to be over Zoom, which is a problem. Not everyone has a computer. Not everyone has a good internet connection. I'm talking to a lot of people in greater Minnesota and they have flip phones, and you're at a huge disadvantage if you're calling in for a court case. There's ways to work around that, but they're not as good as going in person, to be totally honest. So hopefully we'll see some changes around getting resources directed to get people meaningful access to the courts.
Thank you. Thank you for that. It's certainly an intimidating prospect, but we'll be doing all we can, including organizing and door knocking as much as we can. There's another question here. There's a question from Kara for Andrea, and Kara is asking, if I understand correctly, referees can oversee cases if there is a huge influx of cases, but you could object to a referee seeing your case and request a real judge. Is that accurate? And could that help a tenant hang on longer?
Maybe. In Hennepin County and in Ramsey County and in St. Louis County, the courts have referees hear. Actually, they hear judges are delegating their authority. So in those counties, the referees are hearing housing cases and family law cases as well, and their decisions have to be approved by a judge. And it is possible to request a judge hear your case. You have to do it fast. As soon as you find out, basically as soon as you get the court papers. It is possible to either remove the referee you have. We see some landlord attorneys do that. They don't like specific referees, so they ask to have them removed. Or it is possible to request a judge hear your case. It gives you a little more time, very often, if you can actually get that request in enough time. I generally don't advise that tenants do that, because the advantage to having a housing referee, especially in Hennepin County, is you're hearing someone who is someone who's really familiar with housing law is going to hear your case. So they know the law. And in other counties, unfortunately, even though there's a judge hearing the case, they're not as familiar with the specifics of housing law. And it is possible, after a referee hears a case, you can ask for a judge to review it. Again, there's a really tight timeline, but it is possible to do that as well. So I would not recommend that a tenant just overall request a judge hear their case.
Great, thank you for that question, Kara. That's a great question, and that makes sense as an answer. I'd like to address a message that Lynette sent to the panelists about waiting a very long time to get your rent help application approved. And it looks like you're still waiting and you've contacted as much as you could. I want to affirm that that sounds like a very unfortunately common experience. And I wanted to know if Nadia or Reagan could speak a little bit to the kind of extreme timelines that you've seen with this application process. And maybe if you could normalize that as an experience, and if you have any suggestions about what to do while people are waiting.
Yeah, so unfortunately, yeah, Lynette, I'm so sorry, because this is the experience of so many people. When this program first came out, initially Hennepin County wasn't even taking applications because there were fears around not being able to disperse funds. There were a lot of issues around getting funds out initially. I believe the program went live in April and there was like C5 payments by mid-May. It was like really, really, there were big problems to begin with. And so what I know from being a subgrantee of Hennepin County is that I will approve on my end as a processor. I will send it to Hennepin County. They will then do a report to the Department of Treasury, who gave the funds to the state. And then they will come back to us and say, now you have permission to send the checks out. And that process, if there is something not quite right in like their numbers compared to ours, we'll go back and forth for weeks at a time. And I know Hennepin County is working on like improving and making that faster, but they're just one of the grantees out of a lot of different organizations and counties, who I'm sure have a lot of various kinds of issues. It's really, really totally ridiculous. It makes landlords put a lot of pressure on their tenants, even though it makes landlords put a lot of pressure on people like me. And it's so frustrating because yes, all you can do is call 211, who will often tell you that they have no answer for you. And so there's just this like cycle of anxiety, and just like so much time, and so much uncertainty. And so unfortunately that's like super common, and I still don't really understand it, but that's the best of my understanding of what's taking so long.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, to add on to that, that has also been like the experience of like the landlords, property managers that I'm working with, where they're consistently talking to people, checking in with them. Like, I can see the status that it's not going anywhere. And like, essentially landlords also having to be like, I'm sorry, like, we just have to be patient with this. But I think it's good if you're continuing to advocate for yourself and checking in on it and like stepping up in that way of just like, okay, this is my responsibility to see this through. You know, it's a waiting game. And if you're facing any sort of like intimidation or threats on that level of like, well, it's taking too long. Like they can't do anything if it's for non-payment of rent, to my understanding. So you're safe in that if as long as it's there and as long as it's processing, like you're safe from you won't lose your housing for that reason.
Yeah, and again, that's so important for us to make sure that message is clear to renters across the state and everyone here. If you're able to share it as much as you can with your neighbors and the people you work with. And what's extremely frustrating and not right about that timeline, about how long people have to wait, is that we know that many tenants will actually self-evict before they go through the process of an eviction. And there isn't good research on this because it's hard to track, but it's a lot of people because of course you don't want to go through that traumatic process. And this timeline stretches the amount of time in which someone could say, I give up, or I feel unsafe, or my landlord is breathing down my neck, I can't stand it, right? And so I mean, this is why it's really unconscionable that people are waiting 1, 2, 3 months for rent. And so as much as we can speak to that anxiety a little bit and say, you can't be removed as long as your application is pending, and send letter after letter to your landlord that says, this is the proof of my application pending, get off my back, and Homeline can advise you in that kind of communication as well. So please do call our hotline. Let's see.
I remember,
Yeah.
Lynette, I remember emailing back and forth with you. Yeah. And I'm going to echo what Nadia was saying. It is, and what Erin was saying, it is horrible that people have to wait so long to get this assistance, out to tenants. We're getting a lot of calls from tenants and a lot of emails from tenants who they're in a terrible spot and their landlords are breathing down their neck, and there's so little that can be done legally to stop that, and it's really unfortunate. And neither party likes to hear that they just have to sit tight and wait for the money to come, but unfortunately that's really what the situation is right now. Yeah, Lynette, I can connect with you, and actually if anyone has specific questions about a tenant situation, they can absolutely send me a message or send me an email, and Lynette, I can connect with you about your situation.
Yeah, and I'll put my email in the chat here in case anyone would like to get in touch with me, and I'll invite our panelists to do so as well if you'd like to offer that. I, in particular, can answer questions about organizing, eviction defense, eviction prevention efforts, and door knocking, but could connect you to other Homeline resources potentially as well. I want to open the floor to maybe 1 or 2 of our last questions for the night. We're coming up on 7 o'clock. Would anyone like to offer another question, or panelists, do you have anything else you'd like to add to our conversation tonight?
Well, I see Lynette's comment about the broadcast talking about how no one is applying, and I read those articles. I watch the news, and I'm about how money can't be spent, and I'm like, I know it's just ridiculous. There's so much money, and it's just the process to get it is full of barriers, and then making it seem as if people are refusing to apply, don't want to apply, it's like it's just ridiculous, and it's really hard to see that everywhere. But it's a countrywide issue. It's not, a a lot of other states are using the same technology that we're using, this really long application with all kinds of hangups. And if they're not using this specific program, they're using a similar one. And so I am so curious what will happen, because at some point there's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars left, people facing eviction, and the money won't have solved the issue because of the barriers to get to the money. And so I am, you know, we have to do our best to get people to that money, because a lot of the structures already in place to supposedly disperse it aren't doing it.
Yeah, I really wish we had better news for everyone about rent help MN, and it seems like we all just don't. But that only, you know, lights my fire more to get out there, to door knock, to make sure that I'm in touch with my neighbors and standing between, you know, this like very violent, quick system that wants to get rid of folks, and just trying the best we can to out-organize. It looks like Kara is asking, why is the application only in English? It's confusing, yeah, and why didn't they find translators?
I have a weekly call as a processor with Minnesota Housing and the consultant that they have contracted out with. And in the beginning of the program, they said, oh, we don't have other languages yet. We said, we don't think it should go live until other languages are available. And yes, I agree with your rant. I wholeheartedly.
And what are the options currently for folks who don't read English? Are they just expected to call 211 to get a translation assistance? Okay. Yeah. It's just so frustrating. Does anyone else have a question left for us tonight, or a question about the eviction timeline and the process that we described tonight?
I do have a comment. I did speak to someone who was out in Golden Valley, I believe, who was very, very appreciative of people door knocking and letting them know what was going on. So it is something that is super valuable. The timeline is so short when we're sending out letters to people who are getting evictions filed against them. Sometimes they get our letter before they actually find out about the case. So it is really, the more notice you can give people, the better their chances are of keeping their housing, and they've got more options. So they're able to really figure out what they want to do instead of just getting railroaded into a decision in court.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks for raising that, Andrea. We have seen that door knocking and making contact with folks has been effective and has helped people stay in their homes. So it's critical work. And again, I invite anyone who's interested in getting involved in that work to reach out to me personally, and we can talk more about it. I'm going to wrap us up here, and just by saying thank you everyone for being here. I know that for me, talking about eviction is like a heavy topic. It's a really serious proceeding. It has massive impacts on people's lives, and we're in a really challenging and frustrating situation in regards to evictions right now in Minnesota. But I'm personally encouraged by all of you who are here, all of our panelists tonight who are working as hard as they can to take care of each other. And yeah, I'm in it for the long haul with all of you, and I know that yeah, we can make a difference. So thank you again for being here. And this recording will be available on our website within a week, and I invite you to attend future webinars. We'll have these every month, and Have a great evening, everyone. Thanks. Bye, y'all.